So today, Istagosthi, first of all glories to Srila Prabhupada and all glories to the assembled devotees who may be listening in computer world. Today's Istagosthi is on the importance and process of hearing, which is more important than reading. Actually, Prabhupada said he wrote his books for hearing only. And actually, in the beginning, Prabhupada was typing his books, but then he started speaking his books, just as Vedavyas spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Vedavyas had a dictaphone called Ganesh, who was recording everything by hand that Vedavyas was speaking. And Prabhupada in this age had also a dictaphone, which I got for him in 1966, which changed the whole process of book printing, book writing, everything. And it happened when Prabhupada was training me to be the treasurer of the money, take care of Krishna's money, which wasn't very much in those days. So my office was in his room. I kept all the ledgers and the books relating to accounting in his room, because there was no other safe place. And while he was typing his books, I was doing the ledger, and I noticed how he was typing. He used his two index fingers, very slowly typing. And I thought, wow, that's going to take a long time. You know, because the Bhagavad Gita was supposed to be 1,000 pages, Prabhupada estimated. 1,000 pages. I said, it's going to take a long time to get a book out. And then I asked Prabhupada a question. I used to interrupt him a lot. That's when I moved my office out of his room into the Prasadam room, which was the living room, and the deity room, we called it, where Prabhupada offered the Prasadam every day. I moved my office in there because I was disturbing. But I asked him, Prabhupada, you're giving us everything. You're feeding us. You're giving us philosophy. But what do we do for you? What are we supposed to do? And he said the duty of the disciple is to assist the spiritual master in his devotional service, in his work, he said. And that's all he said. He didn't tell me how. He didn't dictate anything. So I was thinking about that for a few days. How do I help Prabhupada? I can't type very much, and he had people typing already to help him. They would edit and retype it over again. How can I help him? I was only 18 years old, really uneducated. I never went to college. So what can I do? And one day I was walking. I used to go to the bookshops and sell Back to Godheads and the other essays we printed, like Who Was Crazy, which I saw you reprinted very nicely with nice pictures. which Prabhupada wrote because of my mother, who said we're all crazy. So he wrote the essay, Who Was Crazy? So there was a few essays I printed on the mimeograph machine. I printed Who Was Crazy, Krishna, the Reservoir of Pleasure, and Gita Upanishad, the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, which was used in the hardback printing of Macmillan in 1972. It's like 30 pages long. Prabhupada said he put the entire philosophy in the introduction because he didn't think he would print the Bhagavad Gita. So he put the entire philosophy in the introduction. So that's when I was walking and I just happened to glance in the store windows. And I came to a shop that had tape recorders, radios, and I looked up at the sign and it said Grundig. Grundig is a German brand that makes electronics. And then something caught my eye. It was a small machine with two small tape reels. At that time, there were no small tape recorders. So I thought this must be something new, because the tape recorders in 1966 were like suitcases. They weighed like 20 pounds, 25 pounds. In fact, Brahmananda had to carry it from Prabhupada's room every morning and evening. And I would set it up with the tapes. That was my job. And on the box of the tape, I would write the date and what he lectured on, what verse. That was my handwriting. So, and then when the tape would stop, Prabhupada would stop speaking, and I'd have to turn it over and rethread it, and then Prabhupada would continue lecturing. That's how important it was for me to record his lectures. That was one of my services, to do that. Some of the early kirtans I also tape recorded, which you can still hear from 1966. The very first ones was Prabhupada playing a little drum. Then when he got a pair of cartels from India, he started using the cartels and not the drum to lead the kirtans. So, but the very first kirtans was him playing this drum, which you see in the films in the park. It's a little round drum. We called it the tom-tom drum, like American Indians use. So I bought the dictaphone. I asked the man, what is it? He says, this is a dictaphone. I said, who uses it? He said, doctors and lawyers use it to record their clients. I said, can an author use it? He said, oh yeah. He doesn't have to type his books. He can speak it in the dictaphone, and then it comes with a extension foot pedal that you hook up to the machine. You replay it. Using the foot pedal, you can type from the tape. The foot pedal makes the recorder go forward and backward or play, just by using your foot. I said, oh boy, this is how I can help Prabhupada. I was real proud, because I said I found a way to serve Prabhupada, to fulfill his desire. Actually, I found out many years later that Prabhupada was dreaming about a machine that could record his lectures so he wouldn't have to type them. You know, because Prabhupada was 70, using his fingers all day long, there's some pain involved. You know. So this way, he wouldn't have any pain. So I got the dictaphone. It was $150. I had some money left over. I had donated for the TLC, $1,500. Ramananda gave $4,000 or something. Somebody else gave $500. Anyway, we raised $6,000 to print the TLC. That was in 68, but I had given the money in 66, which Prabhupada kept in his book fund. You couldn't use that for maintenance. That was a taboo, against the law. No temple could use book fund money for their personal maintenance. That money belonged to Prabhupada, and it was to be used only for printing books. So, of course, the temples didn't follow that and were using the money, Prabhupada's money, and Prabhupada was very upset about that. He had to write a newsletter several times asking the temples to send the book fund money, because the books or magazines were sent on credit and they'd pay it off later, but they were very slow. Anyway, I brought the dictaphone back, and Prabhupada, he knew how to use it because he knew how to play the tape recorder. And that changed everything. Anyway, that's a whole story. But today I want to concentrate on hearing and why it's important, especially to hear from a Saktavasavatar, a pure devotee, Mahabhagavat. It's mentioned in the Bhagavatam that the Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit of all the Vedas. But when it was spoken by Sukadeva Goswami, it became more relishable than the ripened fruit itself. So when a pure devotee touches the Bhagavatam by speaking it, it becomes more relishable, more understandable, especially for us who are Malechas and Chandalas. So here's a quote that's entitled, Books are meant for hearing. Now, in the early days, whenever a book came out, it was Vishnu John who started reading the books out loud to himself. He would sit outside or in a private place and read out loud. And we all used to do that because that's Shravanam Kirtanam. When you read a book, that's not Shravanam Kirtanam. That's called Smaranam. But Prabhupada emphasized Shravanam Kirtanam. So by reading out loud, you're doing Shravanam Kirtanam. You're hearing what you're speaking, and you're speaking. Whereas reading is Smaranam. But that's third. That's down the line. First is Shravanam. So we used to read the books out loud. So Prabhupada is speaking in London in 1973, August 5th, with a Professor Lukács and other guests. So Prabhupada says, one can hear. Therefore I say hear, just like you are hearing. If you cannot read, that doesn't matter, but you hear from the right person. A blind man cannot see, but that does not mean he cannot walk, because the ear is there. His father calls him, "My dear boy, come here." So he cannot see his father, but he goes there by the sound. So it does not mean that because he cannot see, but because he was not educated, the knowledge is stopped. No. The real knowledge comes from oral reception. You hear. Book is meant for hearing. Prabhupada speaking, I'm not. Unless you hear in this book, there is no use. He's practically saying there's no use unless you hear the book. This is a direct quote from Prabhupada. Then there's another quote. All Krishna conscious development begins with hearing. This is also from Srila Prabhupada. I don't have the exact source, but it's a conversation or a lecture. Yes, so they were to go to see some temple which is called Sheshi Temple. So although I was new man, I did not like to go to Sheshi Temple. Prabhupada's talking about himself, probably many years ago. I decided I shall hear. So at that time I was a new man. So all others, some of my important godbrothers, they were sitting and I was sitting. But my Guru Maharaj said, this boy is new and everyone has gone. This happened in Koshi. There's a holy place, town called Koshi. It's 30 kilometers from here, and the devotees, Bhaktisiddhanta's devotees, were going on parikram. But a handful of devotees didn't go on the parikram. They decided to stay with Bhaktisiddhanta and hear his classes. But only a few. And Prabhupada was one of them. So Prabhupada said, everyone has gone, all others except a few selected godbrothers. So Bhaktisiddhanta marked that this new boy is interested to hear me, not go on parikram. So hearing is very important. Just like Arjuna, he didn't read the Bhagavad Gita, he heard the Bhagavad Gita from Krishna. So because I was serious for hearing, and therefore now I am serious about kirtana, means speaking or preaching. Kirtana means to speak or preach. Do you follow what I say? So one who is serious about hearing, he can become a future nice preacher. Shravanam Kirtanam. Next stage is developed. If one has actually heard nicely, then he will speak nicely. Shravanam Kirtanam. Smaranam. Then consciousness will automatically develop, because when you speak or hear, unless your mind is concentrated, your consciousness is right. You cannot rightly hear or speak. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam. And then the development, how I should serve. Prabhupada's explaining the different processes of devotional service. Krishna is so loving, Krishna is so great. That automatically comes. Not silent, but activity. Pada Sevanam means activity, begins immediately. Just like I got the dictaphone immediately. That's called Sevanam. And I did Smaranam because I remembered what Prabhupada said, that I should assist the spiritual master in his work. That's Smaranam. So I did Smaranam, I did Sevanam. In this way, Sarva Atma Snapanam. Sarva Atma Snapanam. He says it 3 times. I don't know what that means. You know what Sarva Snapanam means? I don't know. Then Prabhupada says oral reception makes one advanced. Then Kirtananda, this is a conversation with Kirtananda. Some of us have difficulty in understanding Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati because they were reading the Brahma Samhita. And Prabhupada said yes. So even there is difficulty, let them read over and over and over again. Then they will understand. Why should we change it? See, Kirtananda wanted to re-edit it. You see, the editing started in 66 with Kirtananda. They wanted to change. And Prabhupada's questioning, why should we change it? Let it be presented as Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati has given. Don't give more than 1 or 2 pages at a time. You don't, that if you can't understand, you read 1 or 2 pages only. The brain will be puzzled, and Prabhupada laughs. Yes, when Guru Maharaj was speaking, my brain was puzzled, and everybody started laughing. Even Prabhupada's brain couldn't understand Bhakti Siddhanta. He was such a high grade of English and Bengali. You know, there's classical Bengali and local Bengali. There's a big difference between the two. Prabhupada told me actual Bengali is 95% Sanskrit. He told me personally, face to face, in Calcutta. Whereas Hindi is not a root language. It's not an Indian language because it's not mentioned in any Vedas, Hindi. He said, and I have the quote, that Hindi is a Muslim language. It was brought by the Mughals who ruled India for 800 years. And they came from different places, from Persia and Afghanistan and Pakistan. So Hindi is a mixture of 3 or 4 languages. And the word Hindu came from the fact that when the Mughals crossed the Indus Valley, there's a pass which I traveled on because I brought 6 Mercedes-Benz. I drove them from Germany to India. And you come out in Pakistan in the Khyber Pass, and you come out of the mountains and you can see a vast valley. It goes for thousands of miles. That was called the Indus Valley. The Mughals didn't have a letter I. Indus. I-N-D-U-S. So they couldn't pronounce the word Indus. So they said Hindus. H. That's how the word was invented, Hindu. There's no such thing as, Prabhupada said, there's no such thing as Hindu religion. The Hindu word was invented by Muslims. But Prabhupada said there is a Hindu culture, but there's no Hindu religion. That's bogus, he said. It doesn't exist. There's Sanatan Dharma, the eternal function of the living entity. That is the religion of India, not Hindu. Hindu is not in the Vedas, so how can it be existing? It's not existing. It's a man-made religion, Hindu. It's not God-made. Sanatan Dharma is God-made. See, that's the difference. So Prabhupada says his brain was puzzled also. Even he would speak in Bengali, it was difficult to understand. I told you, because he spoke in classical Bengali, which was written by Rupa Sanatan Goswami. They wrote many books in Bengali. It wasn't the street Bengali, the local Bengali. It was the classical Bengali. There's a difference. He was speaking from a very, very high platform. But I wanted to hear him. That's all. Even I did not understand, but he appreciated. This boy does not go away. I remember in San Francisco, because I greeted Prabhupada when he came back from India in San Francisco. In New York, the classes were minimum 1 hour, even 2 hours because of questions. In San Francisco, it was strange. As soon as the kirtan was over, everybody would walk out. They didn't want to hear the lecture. Maybe 5 or 6 people stayed. But during the kirtan, the temple was packed. They loved the kirtan because they were high on drugs, marijuana, LSD, and people. The kirtans were sometimes 1 hour long. Whereas in New York, they were at the most 20 minutes, a half hour before Prabhupada spoke. So the kirtans were longer, but the speaking was shorter. Maybe Prabhupada spoke for a half hour instead of 1 hour because people left. And even while he was speaking, people would get up and leave. That's insulting. But that's how San Francisco was. In New York, they're more intellectual people. Why? Because New York is a cold, dark place. So people stay inside and read. California, the sun is on every day. Who wants to stay inside when you can go outside and then play and then enjoy? Play sports, enjoy this and that. That's the difference. People didn't read too much on the West Coast in California. They enjoyed the outdoors, the sun. You couldn't enjoy that in New York. Even if the sun was out in New York, you couldn't see it because of the skyscraper buildings. They were hiding the sun. So it's a dark place, so you read more. So people in New York were more intellectually inclined than the West Coast people. That's why people wouldn't sit and listen to the lecture. So Prabhupada said, that was my position. Prabhupada said he gave away his hobby. You know what a hobby is? Something you like to do. So Prabhupada said my hobby was to hear Bhaktisiddhanta. Even though he didn't understand, he said. Of course he did understand. But in the beginning he may or may not have. But he said he was difficult to understand because of the language. That goes for us devotees. In the beginning, Prabhupada had a very heavy accent. So you really had to give a careful oral reception to listen to that accent. and learn it. That's why people today read Prabhupada's books, but they don't listen to Prabhupada's speaking because they don't have the patience to understand the accent of Prabhupada, which was very heavy in the old days. Later on, as he spoke for 11 years in English, the accent disappeared. But in the beginning, devotees had trouble in hearing properly. So hearing takes practice. But with determination, you will succeed. Just as Prabhupada had the same difficulty with his Guru Maharaj. We had the same difficulty. So it is not unprecedented to have that problem. But we sat and listened to Prabhupada anyway. I used to come to every morning lecture. Only 4 or 5 people would come in New York because everybody had jobs. Those who came in the morning would come before their job and then they would leave. But I didn't have a job. I was 18 years old. And what am I going to do? So I came every morning. And I was the only one who stayed the whole day in the temple while everybody was working. So I had the good fortune of being with Prabhupada all day long, up to the nighttime. And then that's why I had all the odd jobs to do, including printing Back to Godhead. It was printed on the day of my initiation. I printed it. October 23rd, 1966. When I arrived, excuse me, I have sinusitis. When I arrived to see Prabhupada for the first time, it was Radhastami Day. It was 2 days before Radhastami. And there was initiation. My brother was initiated on Radhastami. So Prabhupada, I was only there for 2 days. He said, "You want?" I said, "No, I'll wait for the next one." Not because I didn't trust Prabhupada. I didn't trust the other people there because they were kind of crazy. I never took any drug. I never took marijuana. I never took LSD. And I never had sex. I was a virgin. Whereas everybody else was just the opposite. And I was very untrustful of the people who were there. I wanted to study this situation. Who are these people first that I'm going to be with? So anyway, a month later I got initiation. And it was auspicious because the first printing of Back to Godhead in America occurred. So that was auspicious. It's not celebrated on the ISKCON calendar, but it was very important in Prabhupada's Leela because he had stopped Back to Godhead when he started writing the Bhagavatam in 1960. He stopped the printing of Back to Godhead. He couldn't do both. He was concentrating on the 3 volumes. And he published the first volume in 1962, the second volume in 1963, and then the third volume in 1965. So there was a 3 or 4 year interval between printings of the 3 volumes. His first book was Easy Journey to Other Planets. That came in 1959 or 60, the year he took sannyas. And why? Why did he print that book, Easy Journey to Other Planets? Do you know why?
For scientists?
No. Yeah, but there's a more direct answer. Because in 1959, the Russians sent the Sputnik. The Sputnik. The Sputnik went into orbit. And Prabhupada wrote the essay, Easy Journey to Other Planets. How you can go to other planets, not artificially. And that's how the impetus. Now, how did he know about Sputnik? Because at that time, Prabhupada was writing by hand his manuscripts on Russian embassy newsletters, written in English on one side of the paper. And Prabhupada would buy those by the kilo. They're old newsletters, maybe 2-3 weeks old. They would sell them on the wholesale market by the kilo, the embassy. And you could buy them. And Prabhupada would write his manuscripts on the back of those Russian embassy newsletters. That's how he got his news for Back to Godhead, from reading about world events on the newsletters. And one of them was the Sputnik, because he didn't have a radio. Maybe he saw it in the Indian paper, because India and Russia were allies at that time. Nehru, the first president or prime minister of India, was a socialist. And he followed the Soviet system of economic development, which went against Gandhi's economic development plan. Prabhupada was for Gandhi's plan, which was village inspired, because India had 500,000 villages. The population was not in the cities at that time, it was in the villages. Now the population has changed because of the Soviet system of creating factories, thus making mega cities. Delhi now has 22 million people, one of the largest cities in the world. And they live in poverty, because socialism brings poverty and unemployment, because factory. Whereas Gandhi's version, there is no unemployment. You do farming, you make your own cloth, you sew, you make your own bedding. Everything is self-sufficient. You make your own ghee, you have a cow. That was Gandhi's economic plan. And Prabhupada's plan. They were matching. Prabhupada took that from Gandhi's, because Prabhupada was a follower of Gandhi before he met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Prabhupada gave up his diploma for Gandhi's movement. He gave up his graduation to join the Gandhi movement. He was so dedicated. But then he changed when he met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. You see. So, in the beginning, Prabhupada says, I could not understand what he was speaking, but I wanted to hear. That's all. I was very anxious to hear him. See, that's a qualification. We must be anxious to hear from Prabhupada. If we're not anxious, then you'll fall asleep. Because I used to be drowsy. Not in the old days, because I was young. I didn't fall asleep. But later on, when you used to get up at 3:30 in the morning, you know, that was tough. In the old days, we didn't get up at 3:30. We got up at 6 and then rushed to the temple, because first I was living outside, but then I moved in. But we would get up at 6 o'clock, and There were no showers to bathe. In the storeroom where I slept, on the floor, we had a sink. So I took what is called a sink bath. Have any of you taken a sink bath? It's quite an experience. Try it someday. You turn on the sink and you splash water on the 9 holes of the body. Prabhupada said if you clean the 9 holes of the body, it's as good as taking a bath. Because we didn't want to use Prabhupada's bathroom. In the beginning we did. But then we stopped. We said, this is disrespectful. This is the Guru's private bath. See, Krishna conscious comes naturally. Prabhupada never told us not to use his bathroom. We naturally thought we shouldn't use it. So that shows you that Krishna conscious is spontaneous. It's not autocratic. It's not dogmatic. It's spontaneous, based on love and respect. That's real Krishna conscious. Prabhupada never told us, don't use my bathroom. Never said that. You see? He never said, shave your head. He never told me once to shave my head. Because I was living as a grihastha anyway, outside. And very few people shaved their head. But we had short hair. We didn't have hippie hair. In the beginning, everybody had hippie hair. Hari Griva looked like like an ape man from Africa with his big hair and big beard. Prabhupada never told him to shave. Never. See, Prabhupada wanted us to do it out of love. Everything we do in Krishna consciousness should be done for love, not for it's my way or the highway. That's the new way. Not based on love, but based on fanaticism and slavery. That means you become a slave, my way or the highway. Prabhupada wasn't like that. He wasn't an autocratic, and he wasn't a slaver. And he never demanded anything. He wanted us to do it spontaneously out of love and respect. So that was the first teaching of my realization of being with Prabhupada at 18 years old in 1966, is to respect Prabhupada as my guru and teacher, so I should not use his private things for myself. You see? And actually that's in the Shastra. One should never use the property of the spiritual master for his own sense gratification. That's in the Shastra. So, we must be anxious to hear. Then we can hear properly. If we're not anxious to hear, then don't waste your time, because then you'll do aparadh by being unattentive. Unattentive is one of the 10 offenses. To be unattentive in hearing the holy name. So the holy name is also hearing Prabhupada lecture. It's the same thing. Shravanam Kirtanam. So if you're not unattentive, then it becomes offensive. You see? In fact, if you look in some of the old films, you'll notice people are standing up while Prabhupada's lecturing. You know why they're standing up?
Not to fall asleep.
Yeah, because they didn't want to, if they sat down, they'd fall asleep. Not because there was no space. There was plenty of space to sit. But they would stand up to stop themselves from sleeping. But very once in a while, you hear someone fell down on the floor because he fell asleep standing up, and he would fall down. And Prabhupada would look up. What's that? Somebody in the back or somebody fell down. You see? So anyway, these are very enjoyable leelas. So, Prabhupada said, even I don't understand, let me hear. That's all. Yes, actually I did not understand. So Bhaktisiddhanta's writing, Prabhupada is speaking, is not very easy to understand. But we should try. Read and read again and again. And simply that vibration will help us. It is transcendental vibration. Not that everyone will understand. But if you simply give oral reception to the vibration, then that will make him advanced. Not exactly that anyone has to understand it. Just like a man is sleeping and somebody is calling him. In his sleeping condition, he does not understand. If you're sleeping and someone calls your name, wake up, you're in a dream world. You say, what? You see? So this is the same thing. You may not understand, but you get up because the vibration is there. Not that in the sleeping condition he is understanding. We're in a sleeping condition because we're thinking there's his body. So Prabhupada is speaking to us. Jeev Jago, wake up, you fallen souls, to the transcendental sound vibration. That's Prabhupada's voice. His voice is Jeev Jago. Transcendental sound. It's not ordinary sound. In fact, in the 4th canto, Prabhupada says, the voice of the pure devotee is the saffron lotus dust of the lotus feet of Krishna. That means his voice comes from the lotus feet of Krishna. Oh, that's very important. So just the voice. We're not talking about the subject matter. We're talking about Prabhupada's voice only. So just to hear the vibration is very auspicious and makes you advance faster than if you hear from an ordinary person. Prabhupada said, when one speaks from Shastra, he must be the representative of Vedavyas. That's why I never speak on Shastra, because I don't feel I'm a perfect representative of Vedavyas, but I can do Istagosthi, which is a mixture of points of Prabhupada and my personal experiences with Prabhupada. That I can do, but I'll never give a class on a verse, because I don't feel I'm a bona fide representative of Vedavyas. And Prabhupada said that's the qualification to give class. It's not a cheap thing. You sit on the Vyasasana and you answer your cell phone like Radhanath and crack jokes on the Vyasasana. He's making Vedavyas cheap. He does that. I have the video. I can show you. Or you can go to his website and you'll see he cracks jokes on the Vyasasana to entertain people. This is doing aparad to Vedavyas, making it cheap. So I don't feel I have that example to be perfect to speak on a verse, so I won't do that. But I do it this way. So sound vibration. So we should give reception to the transcendental vibrations made by Krishna and his bona fide representative. That will make us awakened. Prabhupada's voice will awaken us from our sleep and enlighten us to our true position of being what? Part and parcel of Krishna. Actually, every human being has an identity crisis. he doesn't know, or she doesn't know, who he or she is. My parents gave me my name Gregory from the telephone book. So that's who I am? I'm the telephone book? No. I have to be something more than that. So Bhagavad Gita's first teaching is to teach us our identity crisis, to solve that problem, that we're part and parcel of Krishna. No other scripture tells you who you are. You read the Bible, the Quran, they don't tell you who you are. They just tell you to worship God. But we have an identity crisis. What are we? Who are we? Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? The dog and the cat can't answer that question or even ask the question because they're not conscious of self-consciousness. A dog doesn't have self-consciousness. An animal has no self. He doesn't know I'm a dog. But we have self-consciousness. We can understand ourself is different from us. You see, that's called expanded consciousness. Animals don't have that. But we have that facility because we're humans, you see. So, Prabhupada is awakening us by transcendental sound vibration. Now this conversation took place with the Back to Godhead staff on December 24th, 1969 in Boston. This what we're talking about the vibration. So it was early in the movement. The next quote, Prabhupada said in January 5th, 1977. Prabhupada says, Gyan, you can have knowledge simply by hearing, not by reading books. I didn't say this. Prabhupada said it. It's on my computer. You don't get knowledge from reading books. You get knowledge by hearing, because seeing isn't a perfect sense. You see?
But you think Prabhupada means his books or just other books?
No, his books.
Okay.
You don't get knowledge just by reading Prabhupada's books. You got to hear.
Hear Prabhupada's books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just read it. The vibration.
Yeah.
So that's what he's talking about.
It's not that
Prabhupada doesn't talk about material knowledge. He's talking about Gyan. That's spiritual knowledge, Gyan. Not material knowledge. If you want Gyan, you can have knowledge simply by hearing, not by reading books. That's why my preaching is to emphasize every one of us to hear Prabhupada's video lectures, which I made over a 10-year period. Because if you hear, see, and read, you're less likely to fall asleep during the lecture. I know myself, I don't know about you, but if I just sit down and hear a lecture, my mind wanders. My eyes wander. I'm not attentive. But when I hear, see, and read, my senses and my mind and my eyes are more attentive. And there was a study done. Give me that. Yeah. This was done in Oxford University and published in the newspaper in India. It involved 5,000 students. Maybe most of you are young age. How do you retain knowledge? So under this study that was done over a period of time, the conclusion is that we remember only 10% of what we hear. That means if you sit down and listen to Prabhupada's lecture, by the next day you might remember 10% only. You've forgotten everything. 10% is nothing. It's practically nothing. If you go to a movie and see a movie, you remember only 20% of what you see. Most people nowadays, they go see a movie 5 times, the same movie, because they forget. It moves so fast. I want to go and see it again. Like, this happened for the first time in 1977 when Star Wars came. The first Star Wars. Oh, some people went 10 times to see that movie, because they never saw a movie like that. They had to see it again and again, because they can only remember 20% of it. And what you see and hear, you retain 65%. That's called hear and see. But my program, I added one other item: read, hear, and see. You read Prabhupada's subtitle, you see Prabhupada, and then you hear him, all synchronized. So you retain 100%. I hope. No, I forget also a lot. So I have to go back again. That's why I make up these files. Because after I make them, I review them over and over again. And I keep these files. Also the videos. I watch sometimes the same video. I've learned my favorite chapter in Bhagavatam is the prayers of Queen Kunti. And Prabhupada gave 45 classes. And that's a small chapter. It's not very long. So it's an important chapter to Prabhupada. Practically he lectured on every verse 2 times. On the same verse he gave in different cities and different times, 2 times, I found out. Actually, through my project that I did, I found out what are the most important chapters and verses. The most important, Prabhupada gave a total of about 690 Bhagavatam classes. Of that amount, about 110 were from the first canto, the first 3 chapters. Actually, most of the lectures came from all the first canto. The prayers of Arjuna was very important. Ajamil, the story of Ajamil, 100 classes. Kapila Dev, questions by the sages, 90 lectures. Rishabh Dev, all those he gave, makes up more than half of the total lectures. From the 6th canto, the 7th canto, 1st canto, 6th canto, 7th canto. He never lectured on the 10th canto. Mostly the 5th, the 1st, some on the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, 6th, and 7th cantos were most of the 690 lectures that Prabhupada gave. So those are important, I found, through my project. And what was the most important Bhagavad Gita verse? That Prabhupada gave 25 classes on the same verse in 25 different cities. Which verse? You read the books. Verse, chapter 7, first verse. He gave 25 classes. Just was it? Just surrender to me, become my devotee. Just worship. Yeah, 7th chapter.
First verse. No, that's. I gave you the system of yoga to make you more attached.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing.
He gave that 25 times in different cities.
Yes.
So that's his favorite verse. There was no other verse he gave so many classes on. And all the cities were from all over the world. He gave. So that, I call that Prabhupada's most important verse on Bhagavad Gita. Because he gave it 25 times. So visual effects increase your retention of knowledge. Especially in Kali Yuga, we want to be entertained. You see? Because our brains are dull from sense gratification for so many millions of years. We become dull-minded. Prabhupada is trying to wake us up with his transcendental sound, Jiv Jago. But once we get up, we're still in a stupor. And therefore, we have to continuously hear Prabhupada's classes. So what better format than video? AVI or MPEG-4 is a perfect way. I've done about 1,250 lectures, different classes, Chaitanya Chaitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, Bhagavad Gita. Then I did another 325 Bhagavad Gita classes in flash micromedia, compressed, because the Bhagavad Gita lectures, like I said, in New York especially, were 2 hours long. So the files would be very big files. So I compressed it to flash. So it only takes up a little space on your hard drive. You have to install it. The flash software is included, and an icon will appear on your computer, and you just click on it. And you can read and hear Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita lectures and the questions and answers, which Prabhupada didn't do later on. In the 70s, there wasn't too many, they didn't record the questions and answers so much. But in the 60s, that Prabhupada did. I kept the tape recorder running. I used to keep it running until it went flap, 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 until the last of the tape. So I recorded the questions and answers also. So simply by hearing, you attain knowledge, and we know that. Right now there's no sun. My eyes tell me there's no sun. Is that perfect knowledge? But I have heard that the sun is rising in another side of the planet. My eyes can't see that, but my ears can see. So ears are more important than eyes. And that's why hearing, we see with our ears. We learn knowledge by the ears. not by the eyes. That's the sum and substance of these quotes. So I employ all of you, or beg you to listen to Prabhupada's lectures in video format. My godbrother here has posted some on his website just to get an idea. So our eagerness to hear is the most important aspect of this. And Prabhupada gives his own personal Leela about this. Prabhupada is speaking, I am speaking of you of my personal experience. How this eagerness of hearing is very important. When I first met my spiritual master in 1933, I mean in 1922, for several years I was out of Calcutta and I could not meet him because Prabhupada went to Allahabad for about 10 or 12 years, where he had his own shop and business. And he was a compounder making his own Ayurvedic medicines. I saw a label, maybe you've seen it, called Days Liniment. A liniment is for pain, joint pain. And Prabhupada had his photo as a grihasta with a mustache on that label. And so Prabhupada was a very enterprising person. He had his own business. He also worked for one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in Bengal, which is still existing. Bengal Chemicals, I think it was called. He was the manager. So Prabhupada was very enterprising. So Prabhupada was out of Calcutta and he could not meet Bhaktisiddhanta. Again, the next meeting was in 1933. So practically there's a 10-year difference. So at that time I was simply inquiring from other disciples of my spiritual master. At that time I was not spiritual. At that time I was not a disciple officially. Prabhupada waited 10 years before he got initiation. So when His Holiness will speak, Prabhupada was speaking. So this information was noted by my spiritual master, and he was pleased to accept me immediately. This boy is very nice. He is very inquisitive to hear. He does not go away. Bhaktisiddhanta remembered Prabhupada from 1922. So hearing is the most important thing. You'll find in the 13th chapter, Shruti Parayana. Shruti Parayana. Shruti Parayana means one who is very much eager to hear about Krishna. He's a very qualified man. So hearing is very important thing. Very, very important than seeing or touching or smelling. So the hearing is the topmost sense. Prabhupada says here, it's more important than seeing or touching or smelling. Hearing is so important. When all other senses are not acting, like when you're sleeping, if there's a fire, you're gonna die. Your sense of smelling is sleeping. Your sense of touching is sleeping. Your sense of seeing is sleeping. But what sense is not sleeping? Hearing. Get up, get up, get out. There's a fire. Then you get up and you leave. So hearing is the most important sense. No other sense will act, Prabhupada said. So hearing is so perfect. Therefore, according to Vedic principle, this hearing is very important. And one who is very much eager to hear about Krishna, he is very expert, because hearing is knowledge. Now, this is in a lecture on Chaitanya Chaitamrita in January of 1967. Now, I'll ask you a question. Prabhupada said the elementary is one should hear Bhagavad Gita first, then advance to Bhagavatam, then the advanced PhD is Chaitanya Chaitamrita. Why would Prabhupada in 1967 give classes on Chaitanya Chaitamrita? Why?
Can I answer?
Yeah.
You can pass the microphone so they can hear me. Oh, you just black it out. So I would say because he was working on the TLC at that time.
Right. Very good. He was working on TLC because he had already received the funds from me and Brahmananda. The money was there. He also got 5,000 from Jayananda. So practically speaking, Prabhupada by January 1967, he had $10,000 for books. It was just a matter of who was going to print them and where. We found that printing in America was very expensive. But we did find that most of the printing of the famous magazines were being printed in Japan. How is that? The Japanese have no trees. They got no paper. How did Japan become the biggest? The Dai Nippon company was the biggest printer in the world. They printed the encyclopedias. They printed all the magazines, Time magazine, Life magazine, all the magazines. And they got no paper. Who can answer that?
I don't know.
Oh, this one you don't know. Yeah, you couldn't know this one. You'd have to know the economics. The Japanese had no natural resources. That's why in World War II they went to war. They had one of the largest populations in the world for a small island. Back in the 30s, they had 80 million people on that little island. But they had no natural resource. So they went to war to get natural resources. And they took all of Asia. They got the rubber, the oil fields, the wood, everything. You see? Now, after the war, they were devastated. But they became the largest, the Dai Nippon became largest printer in the world. How is it possible? And the cheapest. And the quality was good. That's what comes through the screen. That puka. Oh, sorry. Anyway, what Dai Nippon did, they bought forests in California. They owned the land. Therefore, they owned the trees. Therefore, they had paper. You see?
They cut down all the redwoods.
I don't know if they use redwoods. They must use a special tree that grows fast. Like one of the fastest growing trees in California is the eucalyptus. It grows very fast. They even have them here.
Yes.
If you take the Delhi Road to, not the expressway, the Delhi Road, you'll see many eucalyptus trees that were imported from America because they grow very fast. Maybe, I don't know what they were using, but they had to be using, because they were printing so much, they needed so many trees, fast growing trees. I think even those pine trees grow very fast too. So I don't know. Anyway, that's how they got their paper. And it was one devotee who was in the corporate world named Dwarkadish. He gave us the name Dai Nippon. And Brahmananda started the negotiations for printing the teachings of Lord Chaitanya in Japan, because it was cheaper than printing in America, with very good quality printing and paper, because it was American paper. How long have we been talking?
Sorry?
How long?
How long is it going right now? 1 hour, 16 minutes.
Now, the next instruction is hearing attentively. If you're gonna hear, you gotta hear attentively. Otherwise it becomes offensive hearing. So there's a conversation. And this shows how one is inattentive. This is in 71. Prabhupada's lecturing on Bhagavatam in Surat. So one guest says, in the Ramayana, it's told how we should hear actual life. And Ramayana, actual, in that Grantha, how we should live. And if you are saying Rama to be Ashura, Prabhupada says, Rama, Ashura? Ashura means demon. Prabhupada questions, Rama, Ashura? And the guest says, yeah, you said that. And Prabhupada says, no, Ravan was Ashura. And devotees yell at the man, Ravan. Prabhupada laughs. Oh, you have become Ashura. You do not hear properly. See, anyone who doesn't hear attentively is an Ashura. Right here it says. I'm not saying, Prabhupada says. You have become Ashura. It is God saved you that you questioned. Otherwise, you would have gone like Ashura. You do attentively hear. Don't speak like Ashura. Prabhupada was angry. He's saying, Prabhupada, that Ram's Ashura. That's a offense. Of course Prabhupada would get angry. He didn't say that. So this man, he's Ashura. You hear attentively. Don't speak like Ashura. And then Hansaduta says, yeah, you start with your chanting. To become attentive, you practice chanting. Because chanting Hare Krishna gives you the practice of being attentive. Prabhupada said, yes, that happens, you see, not hearing attentively. Sometimes wrong conclusion is made. See, this is an example. This was in 71 in Surat. This is an example of not hearing attentively. You hear something that Prabhupada didn't say because the man was sleeping. So he didn't hear properly. And then he has the nerve to tell Prabhupada, oh, I hate to see what kind of birth this man's going to get for his nonsense talking. So, then, Prabhupada says, so far your visions are concerned, that is all right, but better you give your attention for hearing. That is essential. Don't speculate in the mind. Simply hear. Apparently, this is a letter written to Danavir in 71. I was the first to preach to Danavir in Los Angeles. In fact, we cleaned out his room in his house. We took all his stuff. You know, in those days, in the 60s, he joined in the 60s. I didn't have when the Govinda record came, we had to have a Victrola, something a machine to play records, vinyl record. But Danavir, we took it from his house when he joined. So I could play the Victrola for Prabhupada. And Prabhupada listened to that record 6 hours, non-stop. Prabhupada was in Samadhi for 6 hours in LA when he got that record, Govindam. Non-stop, over and over. That's when he instituted, in every temple, you play this when you greet the deities. Even though it's sung by a woman. But Prabhupada was in Samadhi when he got there. I was present, because I was the president. And I saw that Prabhupada, for 6 hours, over and over, he went into Samadhi. And that's why he gave the dictation. This must be played on greeting the deities, this record. Very important, historical. So anyway, I think that Victrola came from Danavir. So he did indirect service. So another morning walk. Why you did not? That means you did not hear attentively. He's questioning a devotee. You did not hear attentively, and our first principle is hearing. Shravanam. You do not hear properly. Therefore, you are hesitant. Sometimes you go away. And then you come back. Now you try to hear. Our Krishna conscious movement is very simple. This is 1972 in Berkeley. So Prabhupada is stressing attentive. So we've mentioned various points that perfect knowledge is through the ears, not by reading. The topmost sense of all the senses is the hearing, the ears. And the perfect way of receiving knowledge is through the ears, oral reception, from the Mahabhagavat, not from the fake guru who keeps girlfriends and female secretaries. You see, keeping female secretaries is one of the 8 symptoms of subtle sex. Do you know subtle sex? There is 8 symptoms. And one of them is to be overly attached to woman's presence. Sex doesn't mean intercourse. Sex means any attachment to a woman for any reason. You see? Just like some brahmacharis from New York, they're going and eating lunch at a single woman's house. And she knows it's not right because she's a single woman. A brahmachari doesn't go to a woman's house and eat lunch. He eats in the temple. If he wants to eat in a single woman's wife, he shouldn't be brahmachari. He's cheating the brahmachari life. What's his name from New York?
Rai Roy.
Yeah, he's eating in a single woman's house. And she says that this is not brahmachari. She's very intelligent. A brahmachari doesn't go to a single woman. If there's a grihasta and the grihasta invites you, that's okay. But a single woman, this is not Vedic culture. They should become grihastas. They should take off their dress right now, these people, because they're cheating. Next time they'll go to a single woman for something else. This is cheating. You see? And anyway, as a brahmachari, I was brahmachari, we never ate in the grihasta's house anyway. We ate in the temple. The temple serves every day. You go there and eat. Or, you don't like the temple food, you eat in Govinda's restaurants, which is part of the temple. That's also temple food, but you gotta pay. I think you gotta pay for the temple food too. You get a ticket. They give you a ticket. But certainly you don't go to a single woman's house and eat. That's breaking the rules of brahmachari. Then you're not a brahmachari. You're a grihasta. Because husband is not there. There's no husband there. You see? So we have to be attentive. You see? This means you're not attentive to the rules and regulations. You see? That's why I was in Calcutta, and many devotees would go to the sweet shops. The best sweets in India at that time was in Calcutta. And there is one particular brand that was 100 years old called Gangaram. And all the devotees would go there and eat sweets. But I couldn't go to a restaurant to eat and wear a brahmachari. I felt something's wrong. Because in America we only ate in the temple. We didn't eat in restaurants. So I never went to those places. In Bombay we had to eat in restaurant because there was no temple food. We'd starve. We had to eat. There was no organization for making food, only for the deity, but not for the devotees. So everybody had to go and find some place to eat. It was crazy then, 1972. Very difficult to live at Juhu. I didn't have a house to stay. Do you know what my house was? On the roof, and I put a tarpaulin to protect me from the sun and the rain. And that was my house. There was no house. The bathroom, do you know where I went to the bathroom? In the ocean. Because there was no bathroom. So we did austere, but what could we do? We were dedicated to Prabhupada. Now they have bathrooms, fit for a king. But the pioneers didn't have that luxury. We had to go in the ocean. And you ever been in the Indian Ocean in Bombay? The water is hot. It's not cold. And there's worms. We'd get out and there'd be these white worms all over our body. We'd had to find some tube well water and wash the worms off our bodies. It was from the sewage, these worms. And then Achutananda got bit by a jellyfish. Oh, he was in pain for hours. The jellyfish was this big. It washed up on shore, and somehow one of the tentacles touched his arm, and poison came. He was in so much pain. There was no cure. He put cow dung, and it made it less pain. Anyway, that's the hardships we went through. So, and the next thing is to be attentive. So we covered many points. I still have 30 other points, but this is enough now. So I encourage you to order a set of the lectures of Prabhupada's videos, lectures. It comes out to 700, almost 700 gigabytes that you can get, along with Prabhupada's autobiography, which I made, of Prabhupada speaking about himself. Prabhupada didn't write about himself too much, but he did speak about himself. That's why the lectures are so important. I found 35 different leelas of Prabhupada when he was a little boy. How his dhoti caught on fire. He almost died. And how he was involved in the Hindu-Muslim riot and almost was killed. So many leelas of Prabhupada when he was a child. So you can't get that from the books. You can only get that from hearing. There are many things. There's 3,500 recordings, and many of those recordings you won't find in the books. So I believe that the Vani is the books, but the Vapu are the tapes, because Prabhupada is speaking to you directly. That's Vapu, association directly with the voice of Prabhupada speaking to you. So this way you get Vapu and Vani. Vani is the books, Vapu are the tapes. So we'll end tonight. I hope you enjoyed this and think about it and be attentive. Haribol, all glories to Prabhupada, all glories to the assembled devotees. Haribol.